3 scary true Christmas horror stories after a rocky 2-year relationship ended. I found myself adjusting to life alone. I had expected the newfound independence to be liberating, but instead, the silence in my home weighed heavily on me. The quiet wasn't peaceful, it was deafening. I tried to fill the void with work and hobbies, but the evenings were the hardest. That's when I turned to dating apps, Tinder, Bumble, whatever might offer a reprieve from the solitude. Over the months, I had a few matches, but most interactions fizzled out. One of those fleeting connections was with a woman named Tracy. We matched on Tinder, exchanged Snapchats, and chatted briefly. Nothing came of it, though, and she faded into the background of my social media, occasionally viewing my Snapchat stories without ever engaging. It was harmless, albeit a little odd. Life continued, monotonous and predictable. I live in a modest townhouse at the end of a quiet street, a place I'd bought a few years back. It had seemed perfect for a couple starting a life together, but now, alone, it felt too big. The creaks in the floorboards and the hum of the refrigerator filled the silence like whispers in an empty room. I told myself I'd grow to love the quiet, but deep down, I craved connection. It was a few weeks before Christmas when Tracy unexpectedly replied to one of my Snapchat stories. I had posted a picture of my undecorated living room with a caption about needing Christmas spirit. Her reply was cheerful and surprising. "Why don't we do something festive together?" Her suggestion felt bold, almost presumptuous. I hesitated, but eventually agreed. She proposed decorating my Christmas tree, an idea that felt strangely intimate for someone I barely knew. Still, it sounded better than spending another evening alone. We set the plan for 9 p.m. that Friday. As the time approached, I busied myself cleaning the house, buying wine, and setting the atmosphere. I wanted everything to feel warm and inviting, though I couldn't shake the nervous energy building in my chest. By 9:15, she hadn't arrived. I checked my phone repeatedly, wondering if she'd flake. At 9:30, she finally messaged, "I'm outside." When I opened the door, Tracy's appearance caught me off guard. She was taller than I'd expected, towering over me by at least a couple of inches, and her presence was overwhelming. Her perfume was cloying, layered thickly enough to mask, but not quite an undercurrent of body odor. She smiled, revealing slightly crooked teeth, and stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. We sat on the couch, awkwardly close, her leg pressed against mine, and I felt a strange mix of discomfort and curiosity. She wasn't unattractive, but something about her felt off. I offered her a glass of wine, hoping to ease the tension, but the moment grew more uncomfortable when she accidentally spilled her drink on my light blue couch. "Oh no, I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, scrambling to blot the stain with her sleeve. I forced a smile, grabbed a damp paper towel, and tried to clean it up. "It's fine. Don't worry about it." To lighten the mood, I suggested we start decorating. I led her upstairs to the attic to fetch the artificial tree I'd stored away. As I climbed into the dimly lit space, I handed down sections of the tree. She took the largest piece effortlessly, her strength surprising me. We carried the pieces downstairs and assembled the tree in silence, the air heavy with an awkwardness I couldn't quite place. Next, I remembered the ornaments were stored in the crawl space beneath the stairs. I left Tracy in the living room, chatting about Christmas traditions as I retrieved the first bin. When I returned, I noticed she wasn't where I'd left her. "Tracy," I called out, setting the bin down. No response. I checked the kitchen, then the bathroom. The house wasn't big, but she seemed to have vanished. Confused, I tried messaging her on Snapchat, but she didn't reply. My stomach churned with unease as I realized she must have left without a word. I sat on the couch, baffled and annoyed. Who does that? Did she find me boring? Was she not interested? I wasn't even sure I liked her, but the abruptness of her departure stung my pride. Exhausted, I tried to shake it off and relax. The house felt unnaturally quiet again, the kind of silence that presses against your eardrums. At some point, I must have dozed off, but when I woke, the room was pitch dark. The TV had turned itself off, leaving the house in an oppressive stillness. My head felt heavy, and my limbs were sluggish, as though I'd been drugged. As I blinked away the haze, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. A figure stood at the far end of the room, barely illuminated by the dim glow of my phone on the coffee table. My heart thudded in my chest, and I struggled to speak. "Tracy," I whispered, my voice barely audible. The figure didn't move. My hand fumbled for my phone, and I turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing Tracy standing there, staring at me with an unsettling blankness in her eyes. She didn't blink, didn't react, just stood there, motionless. "What? What are you doing?" I croaked, my voice trembling. She said nothing. Suddenly, without warning, she turned and sprinted up the stairs. Her heavy footsteps echoed through the house, and moments later, I heard the front door slam shut. For a long moment, I sat frozen, unable to process what had just happened. My hands shook as I reached for my phone to call someone, anyone, but I stopped. Who would believe me? What would I even say? Eventually, I forced myself to search the house. She was gone, but as I checked the kitchen, I noticed something odd. My cabinet doors were ajar, and the contents had been rifled through. Upon closer inspection, I realized that every bottle of pills I owned was missing. Vitamins, supplements, my Adderall prescription, even an old bottle of oxycodone from a surgery years ago, all gone. My stomach twisted with a sickening realization. She hadn't come over to decorate a tree. She'd come to rob me. The strange behavior, the lingering presence, the silence, it all made sense now. That night, I barely slept. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow felt threatening. The next day, I changed the locks on my doors and installed a security system. I deleted Tinder, too, swearing off dating apps for good. Even now, I can't shake the memory of her blank stare in the dark. It wasn't just unsettling, it was predatory. She'd been watching me, waiting for something, and I can't help but wonder what might have happened if I hadn't woken up when I did. The holidays have never felt the same since that night. Every Christmas, as I put up my tree alone, I think of Tracy and the chilling realization that sometimes the scariest strangers aren't the ones who lurk in the shadows, they're the ones you invite inside. The night Santa knocked all started when I noticed a bottle of vodka missing from my mini fridge. Nothing else seemed out of place, but the unsettling feeling lingered. I called the police, reporting the suspected robbery and sharing the only detail I had about the intruder, a Snapchat username, and the name she gave me, Tracy Gibson. When the officers arrived, they knocked on my neighbor's door, asking if he'd noticed anything unusual. It was 1 o'clock, and he groggily claimed he hadn't heard or seen anything. After about 20 minutes, the police left, and I was left with a house that felt too quiet. I triple-checked every lock, ensuring there was no way for her to come back. Even now, I can't dismiss the memory of Tracy, her disheveled appearance, and overpowering perfume that barely masked her body odor. I'm certain she wasn't who she claimed to be. I suspect she was older than she appeared, perhaps homeless, and battling a drug addiction. She must have laced my wine when I wasn't looking, leaving me unconscious long enough to ransack my home. I'll never forget waking up on the couch, groggy and disoriented, to the haunting silhouette of Tracy looming over me. That Christmas, I didn't even bother decorating the tree. Santa at the door. It was Christmas Eve in 1997. For my family, it was just another night since we're Jewish. My dad, a doctor, was on call at the hospital, leaving my 7-year-old self and my 4-year-old sister at home. Our mom was technically there too, but she'd passed out drunk on the couch by sundown, a routine we had grown used to. My sister and I were watching TV when we heard a knock at the door. I peeked through the glass panes and saw a man dressed as Santa Claus, holding a large sack. He waved at me, and grinned, motioning for me to open the door. "Hey, kid, it's me, Santa. Let me in, and I'll give you your presents," he said cheerfully. I didn't buy it. "Santa's not real," I replied flatly. "And even if he was, he doesn't visit Jewish kids." The man's grin faltered. His cheery tone dropped as he insisted, "I've changed the rules. Jewish kids get presents now too. Just open the door." I refused, telling my sister to call 911. As the man's demeanor darkened, he began pounding on the door. When the operator dismissed our call, thinking we were just kids playing around, panic set in. Mom was unresponsive, and we didn't know who else to call. A few minutes later, the knocking resumed, louder this time. "I know the cops aren't coming," he sneered. "Let me in, or you'll regret it." Desperate, I grabbed some candles from our menorah and lit them, holding them beneath the smoke detector until the alarm blared. I knew it would summon the fire department, which was just down the street. The firefighters arrived quickly, but to my horror, the man approached them, pretending to be our dad. "I locked myself out," he lied. "I'm dressed as Santa to surprise my kids. Please, help me get inside." The firefighters were about to break down the door when my sister and I began shouting, "He's not our dad. We're Jewish, and we don't celebrate Christmas." One of the firefighters paused, noticing my kippah and the menorah. He turned to the man. "Why would Santa come to a Jewish home?" The man stammered, unable to answer. Suspicious, two firefighters tackled him while another called the police. When the officers arrived, they arrested him, and a firefighter stayed with us until my dad came home. Dad was furious with our mom for being passed out and leaving us vulnerable, but he was grateful we were safe. That Christmas Eve taught me that being Jewish might have saved our lives. If we had opened the door for that fake Santa, who knows what would have happened? A cozy getaway gone wrong. December 2022 was supposed to be magical. My girlfriend, Charlotte, and I had planned a trip to the Pocono Mountains, renting a charming Airbnb decorated for Christmas. With snowstorms in the forecast, we left early to stock up on groceries and settle in before the weather turned. The drive was about 4 hours, and we made good time, stopping only at a Family Dollar for supplies. As we turned onto the uphill gravel road leading to the property, the dense woods surrounding the house loomed ominously in the growing dusk. Something about the isolation felt unsettling, but we brushed it off, eager to enjoy our winter escape. When we arrived, the house was exactly as described: cozy, with a fireplace and a beautifully decorated tree in the corner. It felt like a scene from a holiday movie. As the snow began to fall, we lit a fire and settled in for the evening. Charlotte was in the kitchen making hot cocoa while I flipped through the property's guest book. reading notes from previous visitors. Most entries were cheerful, recounting fun family trips and romantic getaways. But one entry, scrawled in shaky handwriting, caught my eye. December 10th, 2022. Beware the man in the woods. He comes at night. I stared at the page, trying to make sense of it. Charlotte, come look at this, I called, but she didn't respond. I walked into the kitchen and found her standing by the window, her face pale. What is it? I asked. I thought I saw someone outside, she whispered, pointing to the tree line. I peered into the darkness, but saw nothing. It's probably just the snow playing tricks on your eyes, I said, trying to reassure her. But as the night wore on, the unease grew. Around midnight, as we were watching a movie, there was a loud knock at the door. Charlotte and I froze. Who could that be? She whispered. I grabbed a fire poker and cautiously approached the door. Who is it? I called. No answer. The knock came again, louder this time. I looked through the peephole, but saw no one. My heart pounded as I double-checked the locks. Suddenly, the knock came from the back door. Charlotte screamed, and I rushed to the kitchen. The back door's small window revealed the figure of a man, his face obscured by a hood. Let me in, he said, his voice muffled but menacing. We're calling the police, I shouted, but he didn't budge. Instead, he began trying to force the door open. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, praying for a quick response. The operator assured us that help was on the way, but it felt like an eternity. The man eventually disappeared into the woods, but the fear lingered. When the police arrived, they found footprints leading from the woods to our doors, but nothing else. They searched the area, but came up empty-handed. We left the next morning, cutting our trip short. The cozy getaway had turned into a nightmare, and we vowed never to return to the Poconos. Even now, the sound of a knock on the door sends chills down my spine. The cabin had a big deck with a hot tub, which was especially appealing. Just the thought of sitting in it during a snowstorm felt magical. The property was adorned with an array of Christmas decorations, light-up reindeer, a large inflatable snowman, and decorative candy canes lining the walkway to the front deck. It truly felt like a holiday retreat. We made a few trips to and from the car, hauling our luggage and supplies inside. The cabin gave off a warm, inviting vibe, exactly what we had hoped for from the pictures. A beautifully decorated Christmas tree stood in one corner. Stockings were hung on the walls, and smaller festive decorations were scattered throughout. The comforting aroma of wood filled the air, giving the entire space a cozy cabin in the woods feel. The living room featured a large fireplace with a stack of logs beside it, perfect for a winter evening. The cabin had had 3 bedrooms, though we only needed one. We chose the second bedroom to store our luggage and began exploring the space. I checked the fridge, tested the TV for cable or Netflix, and peeked out all the windows to take in the snowy view. Upstairs was a loft area with a pool table and a couple of couches, while the basement was dark and cold, clearly more of a utility space for laundry and storage rather than a place to hang out. While I was inspecting the basement, a knock came at the front door. I hurried upstairs to answer it and found a man in his late 40s standing there. He was dressed in gray sweatpants and a tattered, yellowish-brown jacket. He smiled at me and asked, "How are you folks doing?" I replied politely and asked if he was the Airbnb host. He introduced himself as Tom and said he managed the property with his brother. "I live just up the road," he said, "so if you and your girlfriend need anything, just let me know." I thanked him, though I found it curious that he knew I was with my girlfriend. Charlotte hadn't come to the door, so I assumed the host, Mike, had mentioned it during our earlier conversations. As night fell, the snow intensified. We cranked up the heat and began preparing dinner: chicken thighs, broccoli, potatoes, and cornbread. It was a cozy, makeshift meal that matched the setting perfectly. We ate on the couch, lit only by the glow of the Christmas tree, and watched Polar Express, the only decent Christmas movie available on the streaming platforms. After the movie, we decided to enjoy the hot tub. Turning on the Christmas lights outside, the scene looked like something out of a postcard. Snow fell gently as we soaked in the hot tub, the warm water and cold air creating a blissful contrast. Then, suddenly, the jet stopped, and the tub went silent. That's when we heard unmistakable footsteps crunching in the snow. Charlotte and I exchanged worried glances. "Should I call out?" I asked, but she shook her head. The footsteps grew fainter until they disappeared entirely. I tried to brush it off as a deer, but deep down, I knew those were human footsteps. After the hot tub, we decided to shower before bed, but the hot water only lasted 2 minutes before turning ice cold. We screamed and jumped out of the shower. I messaged Mike about the issue, and he replied within half an hour, saying he'd have someone check the water heater the next day. We went to bed, slightly uneasy, but too tired to dwell on it. In the middle of the night, we were startled awake by loud, aggressive bangs on the front door. Charlotte gripped my arm, shaking with fear. "Stay in bed," she whispered urgently. "Don't make a sound." I was relieved she said that because I didn't have the courage to confront whoever was out there. The banging stopped after 3 or 4 deafening knocks, but the silence that followed was even more unnerving. We sat upright in bed, whispering about what to do. Eventually, I locked the bedroom door for added security. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, but somehow we drifted back to sleep. The next morning, I messaged Mike about the incident. He seemed genuinely confused and said if it happened again, we should call the authorities. While not the most reassuring response, it was practical. When I went outside to clean the snow off my Jeep, I noticed fresh footprints looping around the house. My mind raced back to the knocks from the night before. Snow had fallen heavily all night, so any older prints should have been filled in. These tracks looked new. As I stood there, I heard footsteps approaching. Turning, I saw Tom walking toward me. I told him about the water heater issue, and he said he was there to fix it. I also mentioned the footprints and the banging on the door. Tom shrugged, saying, "There are some strange folks around here who wander at night, but they're harmless." He went inside to inspect the water heater, heading straight to the basement. Something about him felt off, but I tried to push the thought aside. I texted Mike to let him know Tom was there. Mike's reply made my blood run cold. "Is Tom the name of the plumber?" Confused, I replied, "No, your brother." His response was immediate. "I don't have a brother named Tom." "Who is this?" Panic set in. I hurried to Charlotte, whispering for her to pack her things. We needed to leave immediately. Grabbing our bags, we made one quick trip to the car. As I started the engine, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Tom walking quickly toward us. My heart pounded as I floored the gas pedal, speeding away from the cabin. Once we were safely on the road, we called Mike and explained everything. He promised to call the police and update us. 20 minutes later, he called back, saying the police had found no one at the property. Mike was on his way there to check things out himself. We spent the next few hours driving aimlessly, trying to calm our nerves before finally heading home. That night, Mike messaged me again. The police found no evidence of forced entry, and he had no idea who Tom could have been. The realization chilled me to the bone. Whoever Tom was, he had been watching us the entire time from the moment we arrived to when we were in the hot tub. He had knocked on our door in the dead of night, and likely had much darker intentions. I'm just grateful we trusted our instincts and got out when we did.